The virtual build module interacts with 4 different application modes. These include a default mode, a virtual build mode, highlight mode, instance mapping mode. Each of these modes will be stepped through. In the virtual build mode, this allows the user to step down the activities on their defined process, and as they do, the consumption data is then added to the viewer for that particular activity and activities above the selection point. In this way, you can see a sequential build of the defined process. In this case, this is indicated with a slightly grayed out coloring, is that there is no consumption data defined here, and as this may be a labor only activity. So as we step down the activity list, we can see that the assembly is being sequentially built on the 3D viewer. Going to highlight mode works much the same way virtual build mode does. However, it will highlight in a red color the parts that are installed or assembled at that particular activity. Stepping through the process, we can see that those parts consumed at the activity are highlighted in red in reference to all of the other parts displayed up to that point. If a user chooses to, they can also exclude certain activities from these particular modes. They do so by clicking the Edit Included Activities button. This locks the user interface at their particular selection point, but then they can turn on and off different activities. Turning on or off an activity is performed by selecting the checkbox. If an activity is unchecked, that activity's consumption will then be excluded from the virtual build or highlight mode sequential buildup. Once their selections are performed to their satisfaction, they can simply hit the Update 3D Viewer, and the 3D Viewer will then be updated. Instance mapping mode provides for the definition of which particular instance in the CAD model is being referenced at a particular activity when the part is a multi-user part. In this case, we can see a bolt is used 4 times on this particular activity. The user or engineer may be concerned with which 4 of these bolts in the overall CAD model, where there may be many up to hundreds of a particular bolt, is specified at this point. Doing so is not mandatory, but it is useful in displaying which particular instance of the part is displayed during the virtual build process. Once a user selects a particular consumption line item, available parts meeting that criteria are displayed in an orange color. The user can select which parts they want to include and map to that particular consumption record by zooming in on it, selecting it, and it will turn green. If they like their selection, they can right-click and hit the Accept button. This will write the mapping record to the workspace. Hovering over the quantity field in the consumption grid will tell the user how many they have mapped, in this case of the 4 that need to be mapped. So in summary, what this mode allows the user to do is, in cases where there's a multi-user part defined for a consumption record, specify which instance in particular in the CAD model is being referred to on that consumption record. As in other parts of Assembly Planner, displayed attributes can be defined to the user's liking. For instance, on the process tree, the user can right-click and they can customize their views. This is done in a very similar fashion to other areas within inside of Assembly Planner. Their preferences are then saved. The same can be done for the consumption grid. They can turn on and off different attributes related to the consumption line item. In the consumption grid, currently some basic editing of the consumption data is allowed. The user will be in default mode, check out all of the processes related or defined in their workspace by right-clicking on the process tree. They can hit the edit consumption button, and this will unlock certain fields within inside of the consumption grid for editing. At this time, work step number can be modified right from here as opposed to going out to the activity library. If there are work steps defined for that particular activity, they will be displayed here, or the user can type in one of their desire. A reference designator can also be applied to a particular part or set of parts. Doing it right here, this can be edited here, as well as the quantity. Future plans include full modification of the consumption records, such as adding and deleting of the consumption data. That will be forthcoming on the roadmap very shortly. Once a user is satisfied with their edits, they can deselect the edit consumption button, and this will store the edit information and write the records accordingly within inside of Assembly Planner.